This is GARIS Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo GARIS. This is flyer number 6.2, entitled What is to be done? In parentheses, men's lib. Description. This flyer maps out the major steps in a political program to free men from the traditional manslaving role of working for women. The initial step is education, to be followed by political action to get the gender laws made men fair. The flyer itself. What is to be done? In parentheses, men's lib. Lenin wrote a famous little book, What is to be done?, in which he mapped out his political agenda for the Russian Communist Party. I will try here to do something similar for the men's lib movements, MGTOW, Masculists, men's rights, etc., suggesting a step-by-step program on how men can liberate themselves from male gender role oppression, particularly from female financial parasitism on men, and the massive injustice of the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts and many other male gender injustices. Step 1. Education. To the average fluffy feminist, saying that men need a men's lib movement is a joke. They will ask, what do men have to be liberated from? The answer provided by the men's libbers is you. That is, from a gynocentric culture that the feminazis have created that is financially massacring roughly one married father in 4, causing him to lose his kids, his house, paying child support and alimony to fluffy ex-wives. Semicolon. A culture that strongly resists the legislation of the paternity rejection right that would force all women to become FIPs, financially independent persons, if it came into law, etc. Men's lib is still in its infancy. We have a long way to go to make society aware that men have huge gender role problems and are really starting to wake up that men are being treated as exploitable checkbooks, being manslaves to fluffy wives to pay for them to sit on their fat parasitic asses in a middle-class house to raise her kids that he pays for. More and more men, thanks largely to the internet, are becoming conscious that they are mere manslaves to women. This level of male awareness is only at the beginning phase. It needs to be spread to the whole population. Now remember, I wrote this about 2 years ago. Things have changed a lot. Good. To all men and to all women, so a lot more education is needed. This process is underway. There are now thousands of MGTOW, masculists, men's rights, etc. YouTube videos up for the world to study. More and more men are having their masculist consciousness raised. They are becoming aware that the traditional male role was to be a manslave to a woman. Now, with the contraceptive pill, household gadgets, higher education for women, women now can work. Women around the world are choosing to have 0, 1 or 2 kids, so that their time spent with very small children is just a few years, which means that they have some 40+ years of career time. So need to be socialized into the careerist role that men have traditionally been. In other words, now that women can work, they must work. Anything else is simply parasitism on men's labor. The masculists place enormous importance on converting fluffies into FIPs, that is, traditional women who expect this is the definition of fluffies. That is, traditional women who expect to parasite off a man's money into career-competent fit women, so that men can be liberated from the traditional manslave to woman role. A good start has been made with the education of men and some women using YouTube videos, but of course this is only small potatoes compared with the impact that the broadcast journalists and TV producers could have if they also had their male consciousness raised. So men's libbers need to approach the media and try to persuade them to present men's lib ideas to the masses, to the hundreds of millions, and in time to the billions, that is, the whole planet. As an example of this, I sent emails to columnists of the major US and UK newspapers, providing a link to my MGTOW Masculist resource flyers, over 50 of them. Oh, it's interesting, it's now up to about 200, so this is quite an old one. So that they can read them and become educated about what the men's libbers are so bitterly complaining about. There are many other educational initiatives that need to be undertaken. High schools and universities should each have their own men's lib groups to help educate the students in their schools. Professors should set up men's studies courses at their universities and write books about men's problems. A lot more is needed in the way of education. Step 2. Politics. Once the whole of society has been well educated into men's gender role problems, the next major step will be to change the gender laws, which means persuading the gender politicians to reform, that is to men fair, the divorce laws, to pass the para, as well as many other discriminations against men. The fact that women have a mara that allows them to reject maternity if they choose, but men don't have the equivalent right to reject paternity, is an obvious and blatant example of legal discrimination against men. How to persuade the gender politicians? These politicians are mostly male feminists and deeply corrupt, bribed by the central banksters to do what the banksters want. The US has not been a democracy for at least a century, ever since President Wilson was bribed to pass the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 that set up the Fed, which gave the Jewish banksters, who are the Fed, the right to print the money. So they have all the free money they want to bribe the politicians. These bribed politicians are not moral creatures. They are politicians for the power and for themselves. They do what the biggest lobby group or the biggest briber wants them to do. In the 70s, the feminists were a large lobby and pushed the gender politicians into passing divorce laws that were highly prejudiced against men, to such an extent that one married father in 4 is now being financially massacred in the divorce courts. This has to stop, because the fluffy feminist-controlled divorce courts have become so toxic to men that 70% of young men under 35 in the US refuse to marry and have kids. They are voting with their feet in rebelling against the traditional male role of being man-slaves to women. This in turn is crashing the birth rate. With the young generation reproducing only a third of its number, the US population will be wiped out in a mere century. Do the math. So the gender politicians need to be educated and lobbied by men's libbers, particularly masculists, who are the most political, that they have to men fair the gender laws, or the US will cease to exist. And similar logic in many other countries. MGTOW/masculists need to put enormous moral pressure on women to be FIPS, telling them if they're not FIPS, they will not get a man. MGTOWs who date women and masculists prefer to sex women, fluffies. So fluffies will face an ever-dwindling supply of robot males, man-slaves, traditional men, who expect to be parasited upon by fluffies. For example, the older men in Korea and Japan. Idiots. Masculists need to set up programs in schools and colleges that strongly encourage women to study FIP majors, that is, math and the science-based majors that allow students to enter university departments that result in them graduating in one of the professions, for example, medicine, dentistry, law, architecture, etc., or one of the techs, computer science, engineering, math, physics, chemistry, geology, etc. That will allow them to be FIPS as adults and earn good money so that they do not need to parasite off some manslave, because they will be career competent and can pay their own way. Step 3. Creation of a FIP society. The main aim of the Masculist is to create a FIP society where all adults are FIPs, so that there's no financial parasitism of one gender on another, as is still very much the case today. 2/3 of today's female college students study what the Masculists call fluffy crap. That is, majors that will not make these women FIPS as adults. They will then start looking around in their 30s for some manslave when they want to have kids. They will parasite on a man. They will be fluffies. By applying enormous moral pressure on women to become FIPS using a carrot and stick approach, women will be encouraged to become FIPS because that way they will have more control over their own lives and a stronger sense of accomplishment, of self-pride, and will be What? I'm going to have to review this. Anyway, ... and a stronger sense of accomplishment and self-pride. And will be punished? This doesn't make any sense. Be punished by not getting a man. This is for fluffies, of course. And for fluffies, will not be punished and will be punished by not getting a man, by being sexless, loveless, babyless, and poor if they're not FIPS. Sorry about this, I need to edit this. I didn't realise. Once the social pressure on women to fit up is overwhelming, and nearly all women heed the message, the gender laws will be made fair to both sexes, and then men will feel safer to have kids again, so the birth rate does not continue to plummet. How long will all this take? I think these steps will be given a hefty boost in a decade or so, when two technological events occur, namely the male invention of the sex bot, that's the sex robot, and the male invention of the artificial womb. Once men have both of these, women will become largely irrelevant. Men will get better sex from their bots, and they will be able to grow their own kids. This will put huge pressure on women to be nice to men, and to go out of their way to be a pleasant companion. Women will be forced to make much more effort to stay slim and fit, so as to be able to compete with the scrumptious sex bots. Until our society is a FIP society, more and more men will adopt the 2A2F lifestyle, which means 2A, 2F, 2 apartments, 2 FIPs, where both the man and the woman are FIPs and have their own apartments. Fluffies are utterly ignored. They have regular sex. This way, the woman at least has a relationship with a man, but no kids. Until the gender laws are made men fair, most men, nearly all men, will boycott having kids. Research shows that the happiest couples are childless, and the unhappiest couples have teenage kids. So why have kids? When the relationship fails, the two just return to their own apartments, cost-free for the man. This lifestyle that is becoming very popular now with men forces women to be nice to men, not to nag them or try to mould them into what she wants. If a man loses interest in his 2A2F woman, he just walks out the door so easily. The gender politicians are like reeds. They will bend whichever way the wind blows the strongest. If the men's libbers can create enough pressure on women to FIP up and persuade the media to trumpet their case, then the men's lib storm will be unstoppable. The gender politicians will be afraid to ignore this storm, so will start creating the legislation that will form the basis for the creation of the masculist vision of a FIP society. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. YouTube channel name de Garis, Masculist, MGTOW, Flyers. Ciao.